I'm here to introduce myself and my company to potential, hopefully many future clients. I've been in the drilling business for 25 years, and most of them in sonic drilling. And with my company Soundcore, I promote services as well as product and turnkey operations. And the word Soundcore, just to break it down, so it makes a little bit more sound for people. Why did I pick that name? A sound core is a good core, and that's the core business. I mean, I'm not so cheesy here, but the word is actually comprised of a few key elements of what the company is all about. So, yeah, with this idea and with this concept, I'm going forward and opening the doors to all those that are passionate about drilling, exploration, and have a few problems to solve, at which I believe I can make a meaningful difference. So now we're starting with this video here as an opening take to invite you to be part of this discussion, because every business has different needs and different demands and requirements from state to country to environmental impact studies, etc. And over the last 20 years, I've been through a lot of these different challenges and issues and problems, but there's always a solution for it, and it just means to work with the client on any of these issues instead of promoting a set solution, which I always found either overkill and too much to deal with from a cost exercise, a weight exercise, and also what I found is a machine that has too many buttons, levers, and complicated setup. The training phase for a driller to get up to speed is very time consuming for one, and maybe you don't need all that for your project. So that's why I try to limit my solution to the customer's specification and therefore questions that come my way.
So the idea is sonic technology
Yes.
you're using. Can you talk a bit about that? How you embark on it, or why did you choose this technology, and how did you start with it?
Good question. Well, initially, I come from conventional drilling, and that can be physically a little bit hard, especially swinging hammers and loading steel, etc. So I was asking a friend, and he knew somebody else in the drilling business. In the UK it was back then, and he referred me to another company in the US, in Marietta, Ohio, and they're still in business. And from these guys I learned the most. So basically I went over there, and within 10 minutes of seeing a rig in operation and the core that it would produce, I was sold. From a driller's perspective and as a owner of a company, I thought that's the way forward. Simple and relatively easy physically, and the result you're getting is almost 100%.
Okay, and for the drillers who never heard or heard a little about this technology, what would you say main advantages are, or like cost savings, or why would someone who does drilling needs this technology but is not aware of this technology?
Well, sonic is relatively new to the community, and very, very few companies around the world promote it as a solution you can buy. So I would say it's represented maybe 1% or less, and so the availability is scarce. Yet it makes a big difference, but also over time what people learned about the technology is not only positive. There were problems called overheating, or very expensive, or it breaks, tooling breaks, etc. So there is the negative seems to overshadow the positive. But it's coming up. A lot of companies take an interest and actually committing themselves to this solution. And the availability is still very limited because it's very expensive. And for most companies to make that step into a new technology, it being very expensive, holds them back.
Mhm. So if we're talking about those blocks which block people making this two things, one is initial investment, and second is like bad information or something. So this bad information, what is the reason for that? Is that because there was lack of information how to use technology, or non-qualified personnel, or what is the concept, or maybe the application was used in wrong in a wrong field or something? What's the why there was a bad reputation?
Well, to a large extent, the beginning of a technology is always tricky.
Okay.
And though it's been around for 30 years, maybe longer, it grew to its potential. But the initial years were a lot of R&D and a lot of failures, and companies, of course, had to make money, and others were very enthusiastic diving into new technology, but not really and fully understanding how to apply it. I noticed, for example, a lot companies buy equipment, fancy and otherwise, and then they put their lead driller on it, but he doesn't know yet how to work with sonic. So he goes in like a conventional driller going into sonic. And you have to understand, you don't use the same torque, you don't use the same penetration, you don't use only force to tackle your problem. So you need to understand how to use vibration to your benefit. If you don't know that, then you create heat, you create wastage, you actually don't create penetration, you kill the vibe. And it all goes at the expense of your product or your sonic head or your machine or your budget. You don't get to the result because the skill is missing how to, let's say, play, like in case of an instrument, right? It's not the instrument is the problem, is you need to learn to play it.
I see. So what would you recommend for someone who is considering using it? What would be your recommendation for successful use?
Start simple.
Uh-huh.
Don't invest too much money. Maybe you have an existing drill rig that you say, okay, this needs to be, it's done its work, so I can use it as a step into the right direction. So let's say you have a 100 horsepower drill rig, conventional, whatever it is, doesn't matter. It has a mast and a few hydraulic functions. We put a sonic head on it, and that package will give you a head start. It will allow you to get into the business without committing a lot of money to it. But from this very simple step forward, you realize quickly, this is the difference it makes to my company. You take an old rig, you combine it with a sonic head, and it's amazing what it will do for you with very little investment and risk.
I see. So for investors, for businessmen, it's probably important return on their investment. So could you talk about potential benefits, and maybe by giving some examples of how you help in certain project and what fruits it gave, and how satisfied or dissatisfied with people?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's an important aspect, really. What difference does it make to a company?
Yeah.
Because you have to put money on the table, and you need to see that money back quickly.
Yeah.
So we done several projects, and it's always hard to choose which one you're talking about because it's been 20 years, and I feel like they were all successful, but it did take commitment. So one project that comes to my mind now was up in the Highveld in Rustenburg in South Africa, and the client was Anglo Platinum, I believe. I'm not 100% sure, but it was up there anyway. The challenge was to drill tailings, slimes dams. So that's mined material that's put on wasteland, and it's a liability because it's full of cyanide and other toxins that are not really good for the environment. But now scientists looked over it, and metallurgists looked over it and says, well, there's still some stuff in there that we might be able to use. Instead of bringing it up from 3,000 meters, it's already up there. But what we need to know precisely how much is in it and what is in it. So they needed to find a reliable drilling technology that can quantify precisely how many grams per ton. And bringing it up from the ground versus having sitting there on high ground was a factor 1/2000 in cost savings. But the problem is, get a reliable information that you know this is correct, because the process of dumping things are very systematic and very logical. You pour it in, it settles, and it grows like organically. But now the drilling needs to reflect that. The samples need to reflect that process exactly. So they've done it 3 times on their tailings project, unsuccessfully with a conventional method. Cost a lot of money, time, and they had no results. The curves were all over the place. They didn't add up. There was no curve that they could say, this is where we're going. So they scrapped it and started Sonic. So I emerged luckily on the scene and set up the drilling system. We mounted the Sonic head on a Bobcat. We just had a mast, we mounted on the Bobcat. The Bobcat was everything. It was as simple as you can imagine. To get started was difficult because there was a trick to the drilling. And that's the point you were asking earlier. Why are some people not successful? Because you need 1 or 2 tricks to make this whole thing work. It's like a horse whisperer, right? This is it. But the horse and everything is already there. But you need to tell it what to do. And then it's cool. So we negotiated the price. The client says to me, okay, what can you do? So I quoted them a price like 650 Rand per meter. The contract was signed over within 10 hours because what I didn't know is that it was a killer of a price. And so they signed, and I was like, I found out later I could have gotten much more. But the bottom line here is the project worked. They had the exact curve. We were within the time frame they allotted for the project, and the company saved a lot of money, and I made very good money in the process. I mean, we drilled like sometimes 150, 170 meters a day, and with a crew of 2. So we were flying. It was a fun project, and it made a good difference money-wise, results, and profit on my end, and it was a good reference.
Win-win situation.
Yes, 3 wins.
3 wins.
Yeah, I always go for 3 wins. You win this one, project wins. So, win. Yeah.
What about environment?
Good point. Good point. The environment also benefits because of our small setup. The fuel consumption per day was less than 20 liters of diesel. Now that's very unusual. And for 30 liters, we included the pickup, transportation back and forth. I mean, the overall fuel consumption was 30 liters of diesel per day.
And why? Yes. How do you save those liters? Like by doing what?
Well, efficiency.
So you know exactly where to drill, or how do you?
No, it's just like the drill rig itself, the consumption of the drill rig, because it's not a huge drill rig. You don't need to haul huge amounts of steel, drilling steel, or ancillary equipment, or with Sonic you need very little, and that saves you, brings the business down to the core operation, and that's essential in the whole thing. Cost saving in overheads. And when you talked about environment, so we don't use a lot of fossil fuels to begin with. The footprint on site is very small because a Bobcat is small and a pickup is small. And a successful drilling operation means that the investor can capitalize on the information, which means in turn, in this case, better for the environment. Because when they mine these tailings again, they take out the cyanides and all that other stuff. It's a environmental reclamation, plus the added benefit of all the minerals for other projects.
I see.